My name is Maria Coryell-Martin and I'm the founder of Art Toolkit. Today I'm excited to introduce to you our latest product, the Triad Template, and this is a tool we designed in collaboration with Lisa Spangler, our friend and ambassador. So the Triad Template is a tool for studying triads, which are sets of 3 colors, typically primaries, but they can vary in the hue and saturation, and you can really study how any 3 colors might behave together. And these are some little examples I'll be demonstrating with today. The Triad template is a 3-inch aluminum template, and it's a circular protractor. So we've got all these little degree marks. And then the key features, though, are these 6 sections, which you can trace to divide up your paper. And triads are really fun to study. As you limit colors in your palette, it can bring more harmony to your painting. So for example, the blues you use in a sky will then be used in mixing a green for your landscape. So right now I'm going around and tracing the inside of every section here. There's a total of 6. And I've made sure that the 0 degree mark is pointing straight up. There's a little dot in the center too you can use to center your the template. And there's also these little hatch marks which point to each of the primary and secondary colors. So there we go. I've got 1 completed, and I'm going to go ahead and trace an additional 3. You might wonder why use a triad template, and I myself have done just dozens of color studies, and I find one thing that is just so fun about the triad template is that it gives you a consistent format and way to keep your color studies organized. It's really satisfying, and I'll be demonstrating that there are different ways to actually fill it up and use it, so you can really personalize how you paint your color studies within. Now that I've prepared my layout for these 4 studies, I'm going to dive in and get started. So today I'm just using the Rosemary R10 brush. This is a size 8, really nice and versatile, and I also have a paper towel to wipe my brush on, because one thing when doing color studies, you really want to make sure that you've got a clean brush in between your colors. This triad is going to be Hansa Yellow Light, and I always start with the yellows. And it's nice to put the yellows on top to be consistent. So I'm just doing a nice Hansa Yellow Light, give my brush a little wipe after. And for a red here, I'm using Quinacridone Rose. This is a nice transparent color. Same with Hansa Yellow Light. So this is going to be a fairly bright, kind of cheery triad. And for my final color, it's another transparent. I have Phthalo Blue, a very, very rich color, or I should say a very, very bossy color. A little bit goes a long way. For mixing them together in the larger areas, you can do this more neat, you can do this more messy. It's all what feels fun to you. I tend to like a little more of a washy approach, a little water, so I'm going to do a little puddle of yellow on one side. Then the next side, after rinsing my brush, a little puddle of blue. And then the fun is seeing what happens when they mix. And I know a little bit of that blue goes a long way, and together they mix a really vibrant spring green. Now let's do the same on the other side. A little Hansa Yellow Light, a little Quinacridone Rose, then let's bring them together. My yellow's getting dominated by that rose, so I'm going to suck up a little bit of that water by drawing my brush, sucking up a little bit of the water, and adding a little bit more yellow so I can see what happens when they mix, and really getting a nice orange there. And then finally, we'll do the same thing with rose and Phthalo Blue. Little puddle of each. I know a little Phthalo Blue goes a long way, so I'm not going to do too much Phthalo Blue. And mixing these 2 colors nice and transparent together gets a really nice cheerful purple, nice and bright. Okay, and now this is drying, and I do see a little bit of that yellow coming down, so I might do a little touch up. But again, now here with my template, I'm seeing the spectrum of the color wheel with this triad, the yellow, red, and blue, and then in these bigger areas, how they mix. And opposite the yellow now, I have purple, the secondary color. Opposite from my red, I have green. and opposite from blue, orange. And this gives me a really clear sense of these interactions. And then finally, with triads, it's fun to see what happens when your colors mix together and creating often a nice neutral. So I'm just going to get a little puddle of each color. And my favorite way to mix a neutral is to start with a bit of an orange and then add just a little blue. So here's just a little blue coming in. Remember, a little bit of phthalo blue goes a very long way. And you can do this in the middle of your template, or sometimes I like to do little dots, little spaces mixed down the side or underneath. Here's a nice little gray. And depending on the ratio of the different colors, your range of neutrals will vary. Okay, let's move on to another triad. And for this one, I have Hansa Yellow Medium, which I'm going to start by coloring in that first small section on the top. And then next, I've got Pyrrol Red, nice vibrant red. Put in my little side section. And finally, I have French Ultramarine Blue, which is fun, and it granulates a little bit too. So I'll see a little bit of granulation. So now I've got my 3 primary colors, and it's time to explore in the larger section of the template, the secondaries. So I'll begin with a little puddle of yellow. Getting a nice orange where the red and yellow meet. So in these examples, I'm mixing the colors on my paper, and you can play with mixing them in your palette as well, and then applying them and seeing the different range you get. And we'll be sharing some more examples, so be sure to visit our blog and our website to get other ideas for how to use this template. Here I'm getting a nice purple with French Ultramarine and our red. This one's a little bit earthier, a little less vibrant than that previous transparent purple in my first example. And now let's see what kind of greens we get. And I love with different triads how colors can impact the mood and atmosphere of a sketch. And getting an understanding first by studying color means that when then you're ready to paint and mix, the mixing is really second nature. And that's where I think of these kind of studies as exercises to build your understanding and awareness and comfort zone. Color can be intimidating, and this is a way to practice and play. I think these are a lot of fun to make. This green is a little bit more of a natural looking green than that previous, at least natural to my home in the Pacific Northwest. And let's take a little look at what kind of neutral this might mix. So just as before, I'll start with mixing a little bit of an orange. And then to that orange, I'll mix some blue and start to get some browns or grays. If it's a little too orange, add the color that's opposite, which is blue. And here I'm starting to get some really nice grays and subtle colors. For these next 2 triads, we're going to explore some earthy and more subdued triads. And this first one is going to be a really fun one. I'm using a light brown, a raw sienna. This is a transparent light brown. You can think of it as a really subdued yellow. So starting with my small sections, painting these in. For a red, I'm using a favorite red of mine called Burnt Scarlet. And it's just a slight more like brick red than our others. Mixes some beautiful earthy tones. And then finally, for our third slot, our third color in this triad, I'm going to demonstrate Indigo, a nice deep, deep blue. And let's see what happens when we combine them. A little bit of raw sienna and deep scarlet. And then bringing the 2 puddles of paint together in this nice big section. And next, let's see what happens with deep scarlet and indigo. wiping my brush if there's too much water. And then let's bring these together. If one color is getting a little too dominant, add a little bit of another. Oh, and I love this sort of deep purplish atmospheric mix. Let's see what happens with a little indigo and raw sienna. Some nice soft browns. And finally, let's see what happens mixing them all three. Getting a bit of that orangey color to start. Some nice deep colors. For my last example, I selected some colors that have some different properties. So the first one is yellow ochre, and this one is just more of an opaque color, which can mean sometimes a bit more granulation, which is an effect I love. And I'm gonna do as my red, I'm gonna imagine a really, really deep red here, earthy red of burnt umber. And then I'm gonna throw in a little bit of a wild card of cobalt teal blue, which is an opaque blue. And I'm just gonna see what happens. And that's one of these things about these triad studies is you can really play and pick any three colors and just say, hey, how do these combine? And these three are still aligning with triads, but you might even just pick three colors that you enjoy, even if they're next to each other on the color wheel, like a gray and a purple and a blue. So here's yellow ochre, and let's see what happens when that combines with burnt umber. A little puddle of burnt umber, and I'm going to get a nice orangey brown with the two of these. A little bit more orangey, brighter brown. And now let's see what happens with a little burnt umber mixed with cobalt teal blue. Nice blending of the two pigments. And then finally, let's look at cobalt teal blue with a little bit of yellow ochre. And then let's look at these all three together. Combine that sort of orangish brown with my blue. And this isn't as traditional of a triad, so I'm not expecting maybe quite as gray of a color, but I can play and see with a little bit of the three what occurs together. I hope this demonstration inspires you to play with triads in your own work, using them as an exercise to explore color, understand it better, and develop your muscle memory. So when you're out sketching and painting, you have more of an intuitive awareness of what happens when you combine different colors together. Of course, you can always add additional colors to a triad, you can expand them, but having that fundamental understanding of what happens when these three colors are mixed together and how they relate can strengthen your work. It can bring cohesiveness to your art, to your sketches, and I hope bring you pleasure and play as you explore them. Please let us know if you have any questions and keep in touch.